Welcome back to the Man That Can Project podcast. I'm your host, Lachlan Stuart, and today our guest is Dr. Adam Bandelli. Now, Adam's joining us from the greater regions of New York, and I'm very excited to have this conversation with him. So Adam is an organizational psychologist and leadership advisor, and with over 20 years of experience in corporate consulting. He's the founder and managing director of Bandelli and Associates, and is also the author of the book Relational Intelligence, and we'll be diving into a lot of the conversations around relational intelligence and emotional intelligence during this conversation. We're also going to be chatting about the importance of taking ownership of your life. It's something that we believe heavily in at the Man That Can Project. Flicking the switch and really taking ownership has helped me personally transform my life, and it's one of the driving factors around why so many men in our community have also transformed their lives as well. If you're tuning in for the first time, thank you, and make sure you take a moment to hit the follow, subscribe button, leave a review and rating. It helps us continue to bring on high caliber guests like the one that you're going to be listening to today. And if you're curious about how you can find out more about working with myself at the Man That Can Project, head over to themanthatcanproject.com and check out our Strong Men of Value Academy in the memberships tab. It's an incredible online community with men from all around the world who are committed to finding more direction in their lives by building their physical and mental fitness. Let's dive into the episode. Dr. Adam Bandelli, thank you so much for joining me today. How's it out in New York for you at the moment?
It's great. We have a warm spell of weather, so it's about 60 this week, which is not normal for January, so it's been nice.
60 in Fahrenheit. I'll have to translate that later, but that's probably still fairly cool. I think 90 for you guys is about 30 degrees for us, so in Celsius, which is pretty cool. But I want to dive in. I'm really excited today. We're going to talk a lot about taking ownership for your life and why you do the work that you do, and some really useful tools and tips for men and all people to take away to better improve their quality of life, especially in the workplace. But can you, I guess, give us a bit more of your background? I know you've had your own challenges with mental health, and I guess what got you interested in the topic of overcoming this and helping others do the same?
Yeah. So it's really interesting. I kind of had two parallel swim lanes going on in my professional life and personal life at the same time that started in my early 20s. So I was down at the University of South Florida working on my doctoral degree and coming up with this theory of relational intelligence and a way that people can build dynamic, life-affirming, life-changing relationships with people, where on the personal side, for the first time, I started to feel depressive symptoms. And as a type A athlete, if you want to set a goal, you put your mind to it and you achieve it. As a kid in his 20s, a man with a huge ego, thought the world revolved around him. Depression is for weak people. Depression is not real. And for the first time in my life, I couldn't get out of bed. I didn't have the desire to shave or take care of myself. And so that went on for about a good 6-8 weeks. And I had some family members who have gone to therapy before. They encouraged me to see a counselor on campus. And I went for like 1 or 2 sessions, and the depression lifted, as it does when someone has a depressive episode on its own. But I went back down to school and even pushed myself harder. I felt like I had lost 3 or 4 months and I had to, catch up for that. But I started to see extreme behaviors on the other end of the scale, where I was sleeping 2 hours a night, working out 4 or 5 hours a day, working like 16 hours a day. So it was just unimaginable to be doing that much for another, 6 or 8 weeks. And then I took an internship out in Cincinnati, and within 6 weeks, I was suicidal. And so my father was with me at the time. He took me to my first psychiatrist that I've ever saw. And within 3 minutes, the doctor had no bedside manner. He just said, basically, you have bipolar disorder, take these 3 medications and come back in 3 weeks. And me, with an ego the size of a giant building at 23, I said, there's no way a doctoral student getting his PhD in psychology could have a mental health disorder. You're wrong. And so I lived in denial about bipolar disorder for close to a decade. It led to a wicked substance abuse addiction where I almost lost my life of an overdose. And so for me, long-winded way to answer your question, my journey about leadership and purpose and calling, and a lot of the things that I think men need to think about in their lives started for me in rehab.
What was it like? You mentioned obviously studying psychology and being in that field. How did you sort of come to terms with the fact that you were struggling with your mental health and it was going to be part of your journey? How did you accept that, and what gave you the power to sort of speak so openly about it, especially when it is your line of work?
Yeah. I mean, great question. So, 10 years ago, seeing a rehab facility, I almost died of an overdose. I lost my job. I was married at the time. My wife divorced me. So everything that I felt was kind of something that I accomplished was stripped away from me. And so I had to say, honestly, look in the mirror and say, okay, this is something you have to accept, and you need to start building your life around understanding what bipolar disorder means for you. Because mental health is different for every person. We have values, we have personality, other factors to play in. And so for the next 5 or 6 years, as I kind of rebuilt my life, I was still kind of ashamed to talk about it. There's a huge stigma. I don't know in Australia, but in the US, there's still a huge stigma around mental health, especially for men. We're not supposed to show signs of weakness. We're not supposed to show vulnerability. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago where a really close friend of mine helped me understand this idea of authenticity, of being yourself. I don't know if your audience can see if we're on video or audio, but I have a shoe collection behind me. 2, 3 years ago, I wouldn't have dared to put that back there because I think my clients would thought I was crazy. Who has 200 pairs of shoes? But that's part of my authenticity. I've been a sneakerhead for 25 years. And so by me really doing some deep work in therapy and journaling on myself, I kind of figured out what does authenticity mean for Adam, which enabled me to say, okay, I accept bipolar. And for my journey, I believe that there are a lot of men who either aren't getting the help that they need to, they're either ashamed or afraid. And so if I can bring light or shed light to some people who are early in their journeys, maybe just got diagnosed, or maybe just started to feel some type of mental health challenges, that you can get past it, you can live with it, and you can live a thriving life.
That's awesome. And that was one of the first things I commented on when we jumped on this video call was the sneaker collection. Sorry, it's extremely impressive. And I'm not personally a sneaker collector myself, but I still can love that about someone. And that's what, for me personally, straight away off the back from meeting you, you are so genuine, authentic. And I couldn't echo more just the importance of authenticity. Going through that experience that you went through where you had an addiction and the mental health challenges, how did, I guess, learning more about leadership and finding your purpose help you sort of learn to live and manage your mental health from there on out?
Yeah. So I think the thing that was really, you say, serendipity or just, a blessing, like I was thriving in my career for a number of years as I was struggling with my mental health. And so I learned from some of the best in my industry about how to be an executive coach and how to do training and development and how to help companies hire executives. So my ideas around leadership were really forming around the time that I was going through some of these personal challenges. The one connection key between the last 20 years of my career is really coming up with this concept of relational intelligence, which we define as the ability to successfully connect with people and build strong, long-lasting relationships. And so I did my dissertation on this, came up with the theory of these 5 skills, but I started practicing them as soon as I finished graduate school. And I saw tremendous transformation in my personal relationships, relationships with my colleagues, relationships with my clients. And so I've honed and refined these skills over the last 20 years. And it's really, with the authenticity piece, it's really shown me how important it is for leaders to be authentic with their people. When leaders do that, they create the conditions for psychological safety, where their people can feel comfortable being themselves and bringing whatever they want to bring to the organizations because the leader has created that condition.
That is a great philosophy. What would be some of those things that leaders and just people in all walks of life could do, or what are those steps in relational?
Yeah. So there's 5 skills in our framework. I'll give you kind of an overview of each, and we can go through each in more detail if you like.
Yeah.
The first skill is establishing rapport. And we define this as the ability to use energy to create a positive initial connection with another person. And so these are some of the simple things we probably learn when we're dating younger or when we're getting into business, like making a good first impression, drawing others into a conversation, the choice of words that you use. Words have power. They can be life affirming or they could destroy a relationship. Things like eye contact, body language, nonverbal communication, all the things that you do when you first meet someone in a business context, for a job interview, personally, if you're looking for a woman dating or you're looking for a partner dating, these things are critical when you initially meet someone. And how well you're able to build rapport will determine how quickly your relationship starts to move in the positive direction. So that's the first skill. Let me pause there. Do you have a question about that one, or is that?
Yeah, I was going to say that's one of the skills that I learned. I was a terrible communicator, and I think you're really talking how the importance of communication and building rapport in today's society, especially with the app-based technology, whether it's dating or even finding friends. There's apps now where you can find friends, which is mind blowing, but people lose that ability to build rapport because we aren't continuing to practice, as you mentioned, energy and the words that you use, how you speak, how you make people feel. I think without that, it's really hard to make any progress in a lot of areas.
Yeah. And if you get really good, and the thing about relational intelligence is these are skills. These are not personality factors like extroversion or introversion. I can teach you how to build rapport. Now, again, you're wired differently than me. You have different values, different beliefs, different personality. So the way that we build rapport with other people will be different, but the skill is universal. You have to build rapport to create a good connection with someone.
What
So
would
if
you,
you do that,
sorry,
go
what
ahead.
would you, Adam, what would you say to someone who feels like or says they don't have time to build rapport, especially in a workplace where it might be extremely transactional?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm a firm believer that transactional nature of work is evolving and changing. Maybe that was good in 1980 or 2000, 2010, but in 2023, at least in the United States, employees want to be inspired, they want to be engaged in their work, and they want to be empowered. So leaders that are making intentional investments in their talent, they're retaining people. We went through last year the Great Resignation in the United States. And so to the leader who will say, I don't have time, they have to do this, it's their job, you may get performance for a quarter or for a short period of time, but you're probably going to lose those people. You're not going to have sustainable long-term results.
That's epic. Thanks for that. And so what was step 2?
Yeah, so the second skill is understanding others. And this is the ability to be intentional about putting in the time and effort needed to get to know people on a deep level. So this is where your EQ is important. You got to be able to understand your emotions and the emotions of others and how to manage emotions to build relationships. But understanding others goes deeper than EQ. It's about being a good active listener. Especially as men, we listen more to respond than we do to actually internalize what someone's saying. So being an active listener, being curious and inquisitive. People who are more curious are more likely to engage people and draw people into conversations because they're asking questions. I just did a podcast a couple months ago with it was a dating podcast, and the research that they talked about is most men like to go on dates and talk about their cars or their money or their houses or their things. If a man goes on a date and just asks a woman a couple questions, he'll probably get a second date quicker because he's showing interest in her. And then the biggest thing with understanding others is empathy. Can you put yourself in someone else's shoes? And if you're able to do that, you'll build a relationship quicker. And this second skill is really something that happens continuously. It's not one thing overnight that takes place. You have to continuously get to know people in your professional life or your personal life.
So yeah. So from that standpoint there, like you mentioned, obviously the positive sides of, I guess, the EQ and developing that, but then also, I guess, the negative side would be, or less positive side would be the manipulation and fear side of things. How do you, I guess, strike a balance with that so you're not, leading down that route? Because I read a book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, years ago. And when I read that, and even like books like the 48 Laws of Power, etc., like I read a lot of that, I'm like, geez, man, like some people could use that for some bad stuff if they wanted to. So I guess from an individual standpoint, how can we use that to be on the flip side where we do inspire and encourage others to take positive action?
The whole premise around relational intelligence is really being serving others and servant leadership versus being self-serving. So I read a lot of those books too, the 48 Laws of Power. That was based on an ancient book by Machiavelli, the laws of influence. And so the whole premise around that book is people are means to an end. And in today's society, I think across the globe, like people want to feel valued, appreciated, they want to feel contribution. And so people who are self-serving, they will get some results in the short term, but they're not going to get long-term results. Leaders who run companies like that are not going to get financial profitability in the long term. So it's the difference between being transactional and short-term in your approach versus long-term and strategic.
That's awesome. And so step 3.
Yeah, the third skill is embracing individual differences. And this is really the diversity and inclusion bucket. And it's the ability to be authentic in acknowledging and accepting that everyone comes from different backgrounds and experiences. So this is really where authenticity plays a key role. It's, are you comfortable in your own skin as a leader to model this for your people so that you create the conditions where they feel safe enough to be themselves? And what this ultimately gets towards with this skill is diversity of thought. If you're a leader of a team or a CEO or an entrepreneur, you should want people on your team who think, look, and behave differently than you do, because that's going to drive more innovation, more creativity. A lot of leaders and a lot of the men I coach, like, they have big egos. And so they don't want to bring people on their team that have subject matter expertise greater than them, but they end up failing in the long term because, having people who have different perspectives, come from different backgrounds, they bring fresh ideas.
From that point then, so we're looking at like diversity, and I 100% agree with that because I learned so much from so many people. But do you feel for people, there could be that element of it's harder to build trust and also rapport with people when they do have different values, beliefs, and ways of doing things?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes to open communication and really being able to be curious, like I talked about. Like, these skills build on each other. If you're going to build a successful relationship, you got to build some rapport.
Yep.
You got to ask questions and learn about someone. And then you got to be comfortable in your own skin and make them feel that they can be comfortable in their own skin. The fourth skill is developing trust, but you can never develop trust if you're not giving people the freedom to be themselves. Does that make sense?
Definitely.
Yeah. And so this one is a tough one. Developing trust, it's the most important skill in relational intelligence. And we define it as the ability to be vulnerable and risk being exposed to the actions and behaviors of others. So especially as men, we don't want to show weakness or vulnerability. But if you really want, and this plays out more, I think, in intimate romantic relationships, like to move towards marriage and find a partner for yourself, like, you got to show some of your good, bad, and ugly of your background. And so people who want to build great trust, there's really 3 things they should think about. First, there's that saying, know thyself. You can't build trust with other people unless you truly trust and know yourself. And so that requires doing some work, whether it's journaling, going to therapy, getting a life coach, getting an executive coach. Like, how are you wired? What are your values? What do you look like on your best days? What do you look like when you're stressed or angry? And really understanding that, then you'll be able to go out there and start to build relationships with people. And when you're doing that, we have something called the currency of trust. These are the 5 C's. So if I'm your manager, the first one is competence. Can I trust that you will have the skills and abilities to do your job? The second one is commitment. Can I trust that you will honor your commitments to me and the organization? The third is consistency. Can I trust that you'll show up the same way each day, regardless of your mood or emotions? Character. Can I trust that you have good ethics and high integrity? You'll do what's best for the company. And then the most important one, courage. Can I trust that you'll be honest and candid and say the things that need to be said when they matter most? So leaders should practice this with their people. Employees should practice this with their management. Those are the ways to really build trust quickly.
And those 5 C's you just mentioned, they can also be worked, because you did sort of touch on that intimate relationship.
Of course, yeah.
Because one of the main things that we see here in Australia, if you go to mental health statistics and men taking their life by suicide, is relationship breakdown. And often part of that is, there's no trust developed, or it has been broken, and people often go, can we rebuild it? I guess it's coming back to those 5 C's are a great way to sort of break that down.
Yeah, and it's very simple. I mean, you ask a woman on a date, do you honor the commitment to show up for the date? Or do you tell, like, those things? I'll tell you one other piece of developing trust, which is really impactful if men can unpackage this. We have a concept called intentional generosity. And what this means is giving and investing and making signs that you care about another person without the expectation that you're going to get something in return. So sending a woman flowers and not expecting her to have sex with you, or doing things for your boss or for your employer and not expecting to get a bonus or raise. It's being able to invest in other people's lives. And what our research has found is that if you do that consistently, you'll have return on investment. It may not be this week or this month, but if people start to see you as someone who wants to help people and serve others, you'll start to get that in return as well.
And that's something to be thoughtful of. My wife's amazing at that. It's something that I am wanting to get better at it. The days she'll come home with a nice little gift, something so thoughtful. I'm like, I wish I would do that. So I've actually started putting it in my diary just to prompt myself because
Yeah.
it's I believe that I'm telling myself I think it's something that can be learned, and I think thinking of other people sort of gets you out of your own way, and that the feeling that you get when you do something nice like that is selfish in its own right, but I don't expect anything in return. It's just that engagement and exchange of value.
Yeah. And then, so if you build the trust, you move to the fifth skill, when we call this skill cultivating influence. Now, people define influence in different ways. I'm going to manipulate people or get them to do what I want. We define it as the ability to have a positive and meaningful impact on the growth and development of another person. So let's take it in the sense of marriage or romantic relationship. You should want to bring out the best in your partner. You should want to help them achieve their career goals and be supportive of them as a spouse or partner. You should want to help them become a better version of themselves each year. And so cultivating influence is about making investments in people to see them become the best versions of themselves. In a business setting, it's about coaching, mentoring, giving feedback to your people on a consistent basis. Most organizations, this is the time of year right now in the US where they do annual performance reviews. A lot of companies just have that one conversation when a boss talks about a direct report's development. It has to be consistent throughout the year. Feedback should be ongoing. So leaders who cultivate influence, they make feedback and coaching part of their management practices.
From your experience, like at the moment with like how people, one of the things you mentioned at the beginning was how we say things. Okay, so when we're delivering feedback like that, what would be some advice that you could give to someone in a leadership role or any role that wants to deliver feedback but is worried about how they deliver it or how someone's going to take that?
It's actually funny you just said that. So we do a lot of inspirational posts on Instagram. Your listeners can follow me at Adam Bandelli. We just released one yesterday. It was a Kevin Hart reel. But how you so how you say words matters. And so if you're in a management position, I'm a big firm believer in this classic saying: you praise people publicly, you give them constructive feedback privately. So the setting and the context that you give feedback matters. Your ability to understand your employees' emotions or their mood in the moment. If they just lost a sale, it's probably not a good idea to tell them where they screwed up. If they didn't get a promotion, it's probably not a good time to tell them, why they need to work harder next year. So timing is key.
Yep.
What you're saying is key. You want to make sure that it's supportive. And then how you say it. Do you give negative feedback in an aggressive and assertive way? Or do you house it in, I want to help you get better, I want to help you improve? And so those three things, the what you say, the how you say, and the timing, those become really critical for a leader to give feedback in the right, proper way.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for that. That's definitely something that's important because I myself have experienced that, and people that I speak to talk about that. And there's sometimes where I'm hearing a story and I'm like, if I was in your shoes, I probably wouldn't have delivered that then or there. And I think it's an important thing that we need to develop on, especially as I guess we sort of touched on at the beginning around, in order for an organization, especially in 2023, to start succeeding, it's not just about the KPIs and a lot of those other metrics. It's about how well you can lead in the relationships that you foster and how you make people feel in the workplace, because ultimately we're spending the majority of our time at work. We want it to be an environment that empowers and encourages us and is fun to a degree as well.
Yeah. To add to that, I think one thing I learned this recently with some of the work I do with my clients. Managers should think of themselves in three different areas. They should think of themselves as manager, they should think of themselves as coach, and they should think of themselves as a sponsor. So if I'm your manager, as your manager, I'm giving you feedback on your performance. We can improve this or that. As your coach, I'm giving you guidance or mentorship on how you can improve your career. And as your sponsor, I'm supporting you when I talk to my peers and my colleagues. So great managers are able to wear each of those hats at different times. They're able to coach and mentor their people. They're able to sponsor and champion their people at other parts of the organization. And they can have the tough management conversations when they need to.
For people to develop that, do you feel it's one of those things that you learn, or it's an ongoing process because everyone that you interact with or every new staff member is so unique and different?
Yeah, it goes back to the whole premise of relational intelligence, being intentional about getting to know your people individually. If you and I are on a team with 5 other people and we have a manager, he or she should really know that you're different from me, I'm different from you. And so the leader has to be able to be nimble and agile and adapt to their people, because what's going to motivate you may not motivate me. And so that leader will have to flex and understand, okay, pay may motivate someone may like more work-life balance. There are different factors. So the greatest leaders that I've worked with over the last 20 years, they're flexible, they're situational, they can adapt to their environment.
I love that you just touched on that around how people are motivated by different things. I was speaking with a client or his boss at the end of last year, and she was like, I just can't get my team to get as inspired and as motivated as me. And I started thinking, well, I'm more motivated by lifestyle than I am money as an individual. So maybe your different staff members are motivated by different things as well, and you haven't created a space where they're able to share that and feel comfortable doing that. So I think I'm really grateful that you just shared that. That's an important part for leaders or managers or CEOs to start considering, hey, what is actually motivating your staff?
So I'm curious in Australia if you see the same thing. So we have the generational differences in the US. So millennials versus Gen Z. Do you see that also in Australia? Like different generations value different things?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
It seems to be across the park. Even a few things you've mentioned around men not being able to speak up. We need to be strong and be emotionless. Like, seems to be a very, very strong thing. And what I am seeing, and this is just a generalization, but a lot of the men that I speak to are over 50, which is why I'm very grateful to, we have this like a men's group where men from all walks of life come in, and you see these guys who are extremely successful in their career, but generally they're pushing 50, and they're starting to be a bit more nurturing and emotional in how they talk about things and what their life has looked like. So I think it's such an incredible thing. As I'm 30 and we've got guys who are 18 sitting there to look at these guys that many of us aspire to have their life, but they're sitting there going, look, I'd give anything to be 20 again and to live more, to laugh more, to spend more time with my friends and family. So, and just to be able to vocalize that as well, because, obviously for them for 50 years, they've been these hardened men, and now they're sort of realizing. So I think it's great that we can learn from that, and the work that you're doing is a big testament to that as well.
Yeah, we have that in the U.S. as well. So my spirituality is really big, important to me. And one of the churches I've gone to for the last several years, we have these things called life groups. And it's really where men can come together, all different ages. And there's like the testosterone, arm wrestling kind of things that we do. But then men get really serious and talk about their vulnerabilities and those who have struggled with addiction or had bad relationships. And so you have 60-year-old men telling stories to 20-year-old men about where they screwed up in their life and giving them guidance and wisdom. And I think as men, it's really important for us to find men that we can sow into. So if you're a 30-year-old, find a 20-year-old that you can mentor, and have someone who's 40 or 50 that can mentor you. I think I wasn't taught that growing up. I was taught you kind of tie your shoes up tight, you don't show emotion, and you just kind of keep your head down and do what you need to do. And, I think the things that our fathers taught us may have been good 30, 40, 50 years ago, but we're in different times now.
What would you say to a bloke who, for example, I'll use the law profession because I see this happen quite regularly there, where they may be doing some work to want to build more life balance or want to change things in how their career's operating, but they don't feel they can express that in the workplace because of the way that the law firm's always done things. How would you sort of approach that?
I mean, so I experienced that in my own career, before I started my firm, and when I was struggling with addiction and kind of the mental health piece, I worked 70, 80 hours a week. And it was, but hey, here's the thing I will tell your audience. Where is your identity based in? At that point in my life, my identity was my career. So that was everything. And I did everything to make that happen. Again, I'm 42. So my wisdom, been when I was 30 and I was 25, like your identity should be made up of a number of different things: your relationship with your partner, your spirituality, your family, your kids. And so I would encourage people who are in those situations, like, look at the bigger picture. The men who are older, you talk about the men who are 50 or 60, they should be starting to have questions in their mind about legacy. Am I leaving a legacy with my children and my children's children? Am I leaving a legacy at the company that I'm working for? A lot of the work we do around CEO succession with my firm, like when a leader or a CEO is getting ready to step down, it's like, have they put a succession plan in place? Have they been able to kind of leave a mark on the organization? And so the leaders who do that really well are thoughtful in how they do that.
That sort of leads into one of my next questions around taking ownership for your life. If you're leaving a succession plan, you are starting to think of the bigger picture. which then you start to think about, okay, well, how does my health need to be in 20 years' time, for example? What do my finances need to be like? Who do I need to have in my corner? What skills do I need to have developed? A lot of people may be sitting there thinking that that's too much work to think that far ahead. But I can't really imagine creating a life that I wanted to live if I didn't do that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so so my father introduced me to Tony Robbins when I was 15 years old.
Good.
So at that point in time, I was just trying to set goals for basketball, jump 6 more inches, dunk a basketball. And this is the 80s, so I'm dating myself a little bit, but it was Tony Robbins' Personal Power Series cassette tapes. And you would listen to a cassette tape a night and you did some journaling. And for me, it was the first time that I set goals in all areas of my life, financially, relationally, physically, fitness wise. And so I've been doing that now for 25 years. And the thing that I do with my team now, my employees, is every year we each come up with a word of the year. And so my word for 2023 is transformation. I want to have transformation in my physical health. I want to have transformation in my finances. I want to have transformation in my company. And we do like a word cloud where we'll put phrases and mantras around it. And it really gives people a rallying cry to have those kind of goals and perspectives. And so it's a long-winded way to say that, yeah, I think people should think 5-10 years in the future, but you should do a deep dive of some SMART goals every year that kind of gives you a rallying cry. Like if you want to be a multimillionaire in 10 years, okay, go back 5 years, what we need to do in 5 years to get there, what we need to do this year, what we need to do this month. Like you have to be able to build backwards to do that.
Well said. And if you can't do that, that's maybe the first step. I always think about what's the next step that needs to happen in order for me to be able to do that. I set a goal, 2014, Adam, to make $1 million in a year. And I'm coming from a background as a professional athlete, but no other skills. And do you think that happened? Definitely not. I had all the enthusiasm, but I lacked everything else. And that's when I hired a coach maybe a year later, and I started thinking, okay, I need to develop a 10-year plan and be realistic around what I have to teach myself, or what I have to, learn in order to make that a reality. And along the way, you realize as you're growing towards certain things, you don't necessarily want those things in your life. They were an idea that you infatuated over, but I think the importance of taking action there gives you the direct feedback around what's really important to you.
And I think for us as men, regardless of culture, where we sit in the world, like men are taught make money, that's the sign of success.
Yep.
And I can say this now, wisdom wise, in my 40s, money comes and goes. I had all my money stripped away from me in an instant, and money has come and gone. So money is really a tool that you can use to build wealth for your family or to invest in a lifestyle you want. But I would encourage all your young listeners, like, do not go after a job just to make money, because you'll find it unfulfilling at a certain point. You'll make that million, and then taxes will take out some of that. And if money is the ultimate means to your end, you're not going to have a fulfilling life.
Yeah. So how is, for you personally, how is taking ownership for your life changed, I guess, your career success, your relationship success, across all areas?
Yeah. So I guess there were two parts. So there was the first part when I was in rehab and kind of accepted bipolar. And then when I sat down to write Relational Intelligence in January of 2021, I had to have a come to Jesus moment where I looked in the mirror and said, okay, are you going to write a book and talk about a cocaine addiction and bipolar disorder? And are you going to share that with the world, that anyone can read that and they'll know that about you? And I said, me helping people is more important at my core than some people not liking me. If some people don't like me because I was a former drug addict, okay, that's not, doesn't affect my life. But if I can help 5 men who may commit suicide because they have a mental health issue, then I'll take that trade-off any day. And so for me, the last couple of years, like, again, I would have never even mentioned bipolar disorder 4 or 5 years ago to you. I would be like, that's I can't mention that to anyone. Now, it's one of the key factors of my firm, where one of our 4 cornerstone pillars in terms of the work we do is mental health awareness. We have a partnership with a group called the Black Mental Health Alliance in the United States in Baltimore, where we help fellow Black and brown people understand mental health, especially for men, that it's okay to not be okay, that it's okay to ask for help. And so again, if my story can provide light to other men who may be struggling, then I think that's me being able to contribute to the world and serve and do things beyond just being a psychologist.
I think it's one of the most incredible things, especially when I looked at, obviously, before we had this conversation, I did a lot of research on you and looked at your profile and your platform, and you're definitely inspiring a lot of people. But from my position, when I look at someone like yourself who has a large platform, and then I see you speaking so openly about what life is actually like for you, it inspires me, and it makes me feel like those journeys are possible for me as well. Because quite often, let's go back maybe even 5, 10, 15 years, we would see movie stars or athletes, whatever, no one would ever talk about it. And you're like, oh, maybe they've got this secret source, or they don't deal with mental health issues or bipolar or any of that sort of stuff. But now we're seeing how they're just human like us as well. And with the right tools, support, and whatever it looks like, we too have the ability to create a life that we want to live.
But that goes back to your point, like there is an ownership factor to it. I will tell anyone that has a mental health disorder, like your mental health disorder is real. Anxiety is real. Depression is real. Don't let anyone ever tell you otherwise. It's like cancer or diabetes, like it is real, but you do have control over it. Your depression does not control you. Your anxiety does not control you. There are medications that you can take. And I'm a firm believer medications help. A lot of men don't want to take medications. That's a sign of weakness too. They help with the brain chemistry. Therapy helps, talking to someone, journaling. I've been journaling most of my life, and just putting my mood down in the paper in the morning. I want to fucking kill this person, or I'm really excited about this. Like just being able to get your emotions out is a good way for a man to kind of ground himself at the start of the day and then go after whatever goals or objectives you want to. So you have ownership over your life. You know, mental health doesn't control you. It's a part of your life you have to live with, but you're in control of your life. And I'm a firm believer that people who take ownership for it, they take more responsibility. They don't, play the victim or those type of things.
Why do you feel so many, no, I'm not going to, don't use so many. Why do you feel people out there may fall into that victim mindset?
I think a lot of it is lack of education, not in terms of going to university or college, but just not being informed. You know, when I was first diagnosed, I was told to just, take these pills and don't ask any questions. And it took me 5, 6 years to realize, wow, there's 2 different types of bipolar, and depression can be affected by the season. Depression can be affected by lack of sunlight. Like I've been through enough in my life, depressive episodes, where I have strategies now that I've developed that are personal for me. One of my strategies, very simple. I make my bed every morning. And because there were times in my life where I couldn't even make my bed. And so if I make my bed in the morning, the day is a success. No matter if I don't do anything else, it's a success. And so, I would encourage people, your listeners who have depression or anxiety or struggle with mental health, like make it almost a game. Like, what are the things you can do that you learn each time to like build on it? Another thing that I do, like I shave my head every 3, 4 days. If I haven't shaved my head in 10 days, that's a red flag for me. Like, okay, maybe your mood's off. So those type of things. If you stop going to the gym, or if you start changing your diet, like there are usually signs that you're getting more anxious or more depressed. And if you stop and think about it and analyze yourself and learn about it, you can help with a lot of that victim mentality.
That's awesome. There's some really brilliant tips. And the head shaving, it's cool that there's so many things that all of us do where we have these habits or routines that if we be mindful enough, and I think going back to journaling is such a great way to do that, because you're always expressing your thoughts or however you choose to do it, but noticing if there's a few things that are off. And it's even good for people that you care about. I know you speak a lot about the dense deposits, what's it called, the deposit mentality. Sorry, and adding to those relationships, just because you've been mates for 10 years doesn't mean that they're always you're going to stay thick as thieves. You have to continue to check in on people. And one thing, I'm not sure if it's in the United States, but we have a foundation called Are You Okay Day, where it's the one day a year where we go, are you okay? And checking in with mates. I love the concept, but I feel that going back to your deposit mentality is we need to be doing that daily, because in order for me to feel comfortable opening up to someone, I want to know you're there all the time. We're building that relationship. It's not just once a year, flick me that text message.
That's right. But yeah, that's awesome. I don't think we do that in the United States. So that's awesome. You guys do that in Australia. I mean, I think at the end of the book, the last chapter in the book, my call to action, one of the sections I talk about is tending the garden. And so if any of your listeners are gardeners, they work in that kind of environment, like you have to constantly be using the soil and working on watering the plants, and like relationships need to be constantly tended to. There's maintenance of relationships. There are evolutions, in romantic relationships, like love is a verb. Love is what you do. It's not a feeling that you have. And so tending to our relationships consistently. I look at myself now, I have 3 siblings. We're spread all over the country. And, the time that we spend together, we have to be intentional. Like I will go down and see my niece and nephews. I will go down and see my siblings. Like, you, just because you have the same blood as someone doesn't mean that you're going to have a relationship with them. You have to make intentional time to do that.
It's a great way to look at things. So I want to ask you one last question, Adam, and then we'll quickly shout out the book and where people can follow you, because this has been truly valuable for me. I've had a lot of questions I wanted to ask you, and you've answered a lot of them really clear and concisely as well, which has been amazing. But for you, in the the way that you live, and the reason why I ask people is because everyone has their own definition of it. And I think it's important for our listeners out there to hear different variations to the response, because we aren't all the same people. As we've touched on in this episode, we all have different values, beliefs, experiences, which make us think, feel, and act certain ways. What is your definition of being a man?
Wow, that's a really good question. I think in my early 40s now, my definition of being a man, based on my faith and where I am, I believe that I've been given certain gifts from God, and it's my job to be a good steward of those things. So I wear a couple of bracelets on my arm every day. One of them is, too much who is given, much is required. So as a man, I am to provide for my family. I'm to provide and be a good leader for my employees. So I'm being a man by honoring my commitments to my people, honoring my commitments to my family, and trying to get better each and every day. I think that's the success, man or woman. If we're either falling backwards or moving forward. So if you intensely try to get better today than you were yesterday, then I think you'll be a better human being.
Love that response. Thank you so much for that. And I love putting people on the response. You answered that really well. So where can people find the book? A lot of our audience is in the United States and all around Australia. So yeah, where can people find the book, Relational?
I would encourage your audience first to go to our website, bandelliandassociates.com. That's Bandelli, A-N-D Associates, all one word.com. They'll be able to learn about where they can get the book via Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple Music. It's also available on Audible. On our website too, we have a number of free resources that your audience can go to. We have over 40 articles on relational intelligence and personality, relational intelligence and mentoring, relational intelligence and dating, relational intelligence and marriage. So you name the topic, these skills are related and important. We have over 25 different podcasts. I was on a sex podcast a couple months ago. It's a variety of stuff, personally and professionally. So those are all free resources for your people. I'm also excited to share that we will be launching our relational intelligence assessment in 2 weeks. So I'm sure you've taken the Myers-Briggs or the Enneagram or some of those tests. Listeners will be able to go to our website, sign on, go in and take our assessment. So not only will you be able to read the book, but you'll know what your relational intelligence is as well.
That's brilliant. So by the time this is going out for everyone listening, it will be able to do that. So I'll have the link in the bio. I'll make sure I grab that from you, Adam.
And then the other thing I would say is Instagram. We do a lot of posts on Instagram. I do all my content myself. I don't use a content company. So it's one of the things I enjoy doing on a Sunday. But I really try to give people a thought-provoking idea that is inspirational each morning. And sometimes we do reels, sometimes we do posts. And so it's been experimenting. At this time last year, I didn't even have Instagram. I had like 10 followers. It was a personal account. And, it's grown a lot in a year. It's been a blessing to do that. No adding followers or paying for followers. It's all been organic. And so I feel very blessed that people are reaching out saying thank you for things. This has helped them in their day. So if your listeners want to get daily motivation, I'd encourage them to follow me at Adam Bandelli. And then same thing on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and all those things as well.
Yeah, I'll share all of those in the links. So whichever platform you are listening on, just scroll down below and you'll be able to find the links to all the free resources. I'll also, if it's okay with you, Adam, I'll share a few of those resources in our Facebook group for men to look at as well.
I'll give you 2 resources that I think will be really good. They're on our blogs page on our website. There's an article I wrote 3 weeks ago around mental health awareness and why people who have mental health or those who love people that do need to practice relational intelligence. So that's a really good resource. You mentioned a little earlier what happens when trust is broken. We also have an article on our blog page about the 7 ways to rebuild trust if you damage or break it. So those will be some great resources. If you just click on our blog page, you'll see those there. Good stuff for people to read.
You're the man, Adam. I appreciate it. You've been phenomenal to chat to. And once again, I am very grateful to be able to chat to people like yourself. It helps me grow and learn. And I'm definitely sure everyone who's listened to this has taken away an absolute bucket load, and we'll be checking out a lot of those resources.
Yeah. Well, I just want to tell you, I admire people at your age. At 30, I was doing cocaine. So for you to be 30 and for you to be doing this and having life groups and helping men, I think that's really admirable. So I continue success with what you're doing, and you're helping people. So that's great.
Appreciate that, Adam. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Man That Can Project podcast. My name is Lachlan Stuart, and I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful. If you did, please take a moment to rate and review the Man That Can Project on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date with our newest episodes. We'll see you again next time.